Welcome, and I'm Jane Buckman. I'm the Executive Director of Imagine Museum in St. Petersburg, Florida, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our Zoom with artist Steve Klein. So Natalia, run the video. Great. This year, our theme for Imagine Museum is Imagine the World, and that's our little intro, since in all of our galleries, we have so many different countries represented. So currently I'm in the exhibition that it's entitled, It's Not Always Black and White, where we invite the viewer to examine the works of art more closely, to not only appreciate the beauty of the form and the various techniques, but really to inquire further into the artist's intent and concept behind their creative expressions. Steve's work is in this exhibit is a kiln-formed series of curved forms with silk-screened images inside of their interiors that depict our natural environment and all of its beauty and decay. The work is entitled, Are We Losing?, which invites the viewer into his world of nature and the environment, encouraging the viewer to question, are we losing our way? Steve's authority on these issues rests on observation in his own backyard and the area which he calls home in O'Connor, Washington, where he maintains a studio in the middle of several hundred acres of farmland with incredible views of the mountains, the streams, migrating birds, and the largest fields of daffodils and tulips in North America. Steve is quoted as saying, "There is no shortage of nature's inspiration right outside my door." Myself, having lived in the Northwest for 14 years, I can attest to the beauty he describes. Steve came to working with glass as an artistic material when he was 50 years old, after having taken a class at the infamous Pilchuck Glass School, founded by Dale Chihuly and Ann Hugh. Since then, he's created works that are shown throughout the United States, Europe, Australia, China, and Taiwan. Steve continues to teach workshops, sits on Pilchuck's board, and creates the work of art that are infused with his voice on matters that are close to his heart and the environment that surrounds him. So welcome, Steve. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you very much, Jane. That was a really nice introduction.
Well, and go ahead.
I was going to say I am at Pilchuck right now, and extremely happy to be there given these times. I'm here at doing a residency with 10 other artists. It's not a class, it's really a residency, and Pilchuck has invited us to be here. We're here for 8 days, artists from all over the country, and it's very strange because on a campus normally with 100 people, there are 11 of us and maybe about 5 staff. So it feels very different here. It's a little bit lonely, but incredibly beautiful and really a wonderful place to be.
What a wonderful week ahead that you have, though, to be there with all the creatives. I just think that that would be an ideal setting to share information and creativity.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. I've reviewed the PowerPoints that you sent us, Steve, and they are packed with so much content. I'm anxious for us to begin. So you have the platform to discuss your visions and statements, execution, and outcomes. So here we go.
Okay, well, thank you again. Thank you for having me. Thank you for acquiring my work and showing it. I think that particular piece has been very important to me. So this presentation is titled Life Cycles of a Maturing Artist. And At the age of in 1996, at the age of 50, I came to the Pilchuck, beginning my life cycle as an artist. And it was really after 25 years in a business career, dealing primarily with engineers and buyers, and I needed a change. I expressed that thought to my wife after spending a summer at Pilchuck, and she was surprised, mystified, perplexed, and puzzled. But after a while, finally did agree to support my new obsession. It's interesting that research has observed that there are two different life cycles theorized for artists. Artists who peak late are more motivated by aesthetics, as opposed to artists who peak early are more motivated by conceptual concerns. So the transition from civilian life to being an obsessed full-time artist was not difficult. I always wanted an art education, but my life experience continued to feed my artistic goals. And there have been many muses I've had during this time, but the first and most important is light, and no one does it better than nature.
Mhm.
This is my first piece of glass, and it was entitled Chaos. I made it at Pilchuck, and I found the material incredibly daunting. It had the consistency of honey. It was too hot to touch, and it just didn't behave like I was used to something behaving. And we fought for control. Early on, an artist that I met here at Pilchuck, Henry Halem, told me that all work is about something, and you need to figure out what your work is about. And I knew I simply wanted to have people enjoy the light, enjoy the material and beauty as much as I did. And I started the exploration series, and that became my way of paying homage to painters I admired and had studied for years, Mondrian, Malevich, Hoffman, and exploring relationships between color, shape, and line. So my life has been blessed really with another muse, and that would be Scotland. I've taught and facilitated many residencies at Northland's Creative Glass. It's in the far north of Scotland, really wonderful place. You can't have too many layers of clothes there. And it's so inspiring, the fields of straw, the North Sea, 4,500-year-old standing stones and the ancient structures that have all led to series of work. And in Scotland, it's interesting because life cycles are prominent and have a very meaningful influence. When standing next to a stone that's been placed 4,500 years ago, I kind of ask myself, who did it? Why did they do it? Who else has touched this in 4,000 years? And spent a lot of time just sitting on a cliff looking at the North Sea and being inspired by the light and the wind, and enjoying every part of it. This particular series, a shelter series, started right here in this enclosure that was originally meant for sheep, but it was the most perfect day with the beautiful sky and the pink heather. And as a group, we sat in there for protection. Another very meaningful part of my life came in 2006 when I turned 60 and realized I was a lot closer to the end than the beginning. And I was invited to do a show at Bullseye, and I called that show Memory and Consequence. And it really was, it was about remembering my childhood. All of a sudden, these things, memories start coming back to me. And the work was about growing up and taking chances, leading and following, including, excluding, and learning what worked and what didn't work to get along in a complicated world. Color has always been a kind of a mystery to me, and maybe because I haven't had an art education. But the first 60 years of my life, I lived in Southern California, and a friend pointed out to me one time that, hey, your visual, you drive to your studio every day and your world is all monochromatic. And I never realized that until he said that. And Louise Nevelson said, some of us come on earth seeing, some of us come on earth seeing color. And I thought that was a really appropriate statement to me.
Mhm.
15 years ago, we moved to the state of Washington, a little town about 70 miles north of Seattle called LaConner. And it didn't take long to enjoy the depth and variation of color because it was all around me, all provided by nature. The whole life cycle of seasons and hiking our local mountains, walking through tulip fields, and they were all cause for just this internal celebration and inspiration for new work. And that work continues. So now the series, Are We Losing? It focuses on the majesty of nature, as I've been fortunate to enjoy, versus the current glut of profiteering at the expense of our environment. Uh, I'm worried future generations aren't going to have clean air. They're not going to have forests to hike in. There won't be oceans and lakes and rivers free from garbage and chemicals. And I hope we wake up before it's too late. This is a brand new piece, and while it's important to me to speak with beauty, this piece is a personal statement on the current divide in our country and the failure to find common ground. And my concern is that we end up in a black hole that doesn't benefit anybody. So I think in the end, like a lot of artists, I'm going to follow the lead of Leonard Bernstein, who in 64 after 63, after the assassination of John Kennedy, said, "This will be our reply to violence and discord, to make music more intensely, more beautifully, and more devotedly than ever before."
So aptly put. I think that that's wonderful. And before we start moving on, then let's learn more about this series. This is a series you completed in 2020, I believe, correct?
Right. This was, COVID was a really interesting time for me while I was working on a show that's actually going to be in 2022. I had a lot of extra time, and I think after all these years, I just wanted to play. I wanted to get away from what I was doing all the time and just play. And I had experimented with powders, glass powders, for quite a few years, off and on, and just decided I'm going to make wall work, and it's going to be with powders. And I started experimenting. You can go to the next slide, please. And I ended up with these wall pieces. So it took a year, and there were 23 wall pieces, all made with powdered glass. They're all 17 by 20. And I called the series Discovery because the work, for the most part, really wasn't about anything. It was just about discovering a new material and new ways of working. And every one of these pieces led to another piece, and it's been an incredibly interesting journey, and it's really one that I'm going to continue on. Although right now the show opened a couple weeks ago, and I just decided, okay, I put it away and need to work on stuff for next year. This piece was something I made during COVID. I was wearing the mask. I mean, yes, it's necessary, and
Mhm.
I'm happy to do it, but I would just be pissed off every day about it. And so for about 20 days, I took my mask and I put it on a piece of red glass. I sprinkled a bunch of black powder on. I put it in the kiln and burned it up. And every day it left a different amount of residue, and I ended up putting these in a small exhibit. But this was my reaction to Pilchuck with these masks. So the next slide. What I'm working on right now, and will be until next year, is a show that will be at the Museum of Northwest Art, and it's called A Precarious Edge. The show is with another artist that lives near me. Her name is Meg Holgate. She's an incredible painter, and she and I have worked on other things together. But we're looking at the edge of where we're at right now in nature with climate change and what's going to happen. Are we going to fall? Are we going to fall off that edge and really lose the beauty that we enjoy in nature, future generations? So this is a map of the museum. It's about 3,000 square feet on this floor, and what we're going to put there. My pieces will all be pedestal. Meg will be on the walls. This is a mock-up of one of the pieces looking at the idea of glaciers and icebergs. This piece is going to be about a 10 by 10 wall. Next slide, please. So what I'm showing now is just some samples and mock-ups. This piece is exploring the how the volume of glaciers over the past 100 years has decreased, and each of these pieces will represent a 10-year period of. And I mean, this chart shows the decrease in the volume, and the icebergs and glaciers are so important to the earth. They reflect the light, and when they disappear, our oceans warm. When the oceans warm, everything else warms, and it's just a chain reaction that affects us, and it affects humans in every way. This is a piece exploring the ocean. This piece it's a fairly large piece, 3 foot by 16 foot, and it's the ocean, and what is below it. There's a large glass net that goes over this too, and it really just speaks to the pollution that is prevalent now in the oceans, where we had these beautiful clear waters. We don't anymore. This piece looks at the forest. It's eventually going to extend for 30 feet, and looks at global warming, how it's affected the forest fires, and you know, particularly up here in the Northwest, the beauty of the forest is something that we get to live with every day. And I can walk out my door and hike in a beautiful forest, and looking at the fires all over the particularly on the West Coast and in Western Canada. It's so disturbing to walk into a burnt forest. It smells. You know, there's a sadness within the entire environment there. But again, we're looking at the good and the bad. We're trying to look at it in a way that we're making beautiful pieces. Meg's paintings are beautiful. I think the glass work is beautiful, and we're saying it's not going to be here. We're saying to kids, go home and tell your mom and dad. They have to do something. They have to get involved. This is a process shot just in a kiln, how I'm slumping the pieces. Yeah, so they're set on a mold and heated up and slump. This is another piece that will explore the idea of what's happening to clean air here with the coal plants that where we're burning and polluting our air. And do we have another slide? Okay, this is a series I did actually at the Museum of Glass, and I just looked at the sky, and fortunately I live in an area where skies are beautiful. Sunrise, sunsets, stormy days, there's just an endless beauty to the skies here. And at the end, I think there is hope in the world, in our country. I have hope for future generations. And at this point in my career and in my life, this is the direction I choose to go. I really I want my work to get people to wake up and get some people to pay attention.
Well, Steve, all of that work is really thought-provoking, as well as the element of beauty inside of all of the tragedy that you're actually showing. I'm curious, as you have these kiln form arc type of shapes, when you say that they're 30 feet and they're on pedestals, so then is that how they're going to be displayed and on one long pedestal?
Yes.
And then
Yes,
that's
the
pretty,
idea, yeah, the idea of that is to give the viewer, in a way, the idea of walking through a forest, but during that 30-foot walk, they'll experience part of a forest that's been burned out and realize that, and there's some more pieces that are a clear-cut forest, and realize that, forests change, and here we have the beautiful, the greens and the blue skies, but we also have, forest fires, we have clear cutting, and just to experience the different aspects of a forest.
and so and they contain, I think what I saw in the photos is that then the photo imaging then that goes on top of the glass then?
Yes,
The
there's
images
there's
that you,
silk screened images.
Is that that's after the fact then they're out of the kiln?
Yeah,
So
it's a
yeah,
little bit of
you
a
do, yeah.
process. I mean, those pieces take, technically, they take 3 firings, one to fuse the entire composition together, and then a second one when I put the silk screen on, and there's a texture actually put onto the backside, and then the third firing slumps them over the mold.
Wow. Wow. So how many of those are you doing for this particular show then,
Um,
with the story?
What an interesting question. I hadn't counted them yet. I think there's gonna be probably around 35
Wow. Wow.
pieces for that piece. Yeah.
And those are going to be shown where again?
The Museum of Northwest Art.
Wonderful. In Lacana, right?
It's in it's in
Yeah.
La Conner,
Yeah. It's a
and
beautiful
uh,
museum.
yeah, it's a really wonderful place, and we're really fortunate to go there. And then there's been some interest to possibly travel part of the exhibits after that.
I would think so, with such a strong message, even outside of the museum, to bring people's attention to it. But it is all quite stunning. I commend you for your the stories that you want to tell and the urgency with how you're telling them. So it is quite impactful. I think very similar to the pieces that are in this show as well. And it's just it's a great path that you're taking at this time in your career, and I do wish you great success with it. Are
Thank
there
you.
any questions from our audience for Steve and his work? Sometimes there are, sometimes they're not. And
Yes, we're gonna ask to unmute everybody.
okay. Well,
I did too good a job of
Actually,
telling my
Tricia
story.
has a question.
okay.
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Okay. Yeah, I've never known anything about working with powdered glass. Do you like just put the different colors of powder down and then you heat it up and melt it, or how does that work, and how do you use it?
Okay, it's really interesting. Right now, I'm working primarily with, I'm putting powdered glass onto silk screens that are blank. Although the ones like silk screening the powder onto the forest pieces, those I've taken images and made a screen of the trees or whatever, and silk screen. If you've seen t-shirts or something silk screen, it's the same process, but the screens have a larger mesh. And it's just a matter of putting spreading the powder out and pulling and pushing and having it come through the screens. And then with the powder pieces I'm making, I'm doing several firings. They're low temperature firings. For those of you who know kiln working at all, I fire at about 1215 to 1250. So it keeps the powder with the texture. And you can put the powder on. I can throw it on with a spoon. I can throw it on with my hands. I can sift it with a flour sifter, or I can run it through a silk screen. There are just so many ways of, Trish, putting it onto the glass. I start with just a piece of clear glass and start putting powders on it, and I fire it, and it's so interesting. Kind of like a paint. It's like almost like a painter works, because you can go back and you can add. If you don't like something, powder over it and fire it again.
See all the crumbs on the.
So with the, with kiln form work, if you finish it and it doesn't look right, hit it with a hammer and throw it away. Recycle the glass or something. With this powder work, if something doesn't come out right, put powder over it and start over. It's really fascinating and so interesting. And I have several friends that are painters, and I go to their studios and well, where'd that painting come from? Oh, I painted over something that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And it's great.
Yes. And I observe more people who work with glass are starting to take that approach too. So it is interesting to see that whole area of the glass painting with the color, with the frit move forward. So you're probably one of the pioneers moving in that direction. Anyone else any other questions that we have out there?
Yes. Hi, Steve.
Hi,
Good to
Susan.
see you. During your residency, are you continuing to work on this same project, or are you working on something else because you are at this special place at this special time with these special people?
Thank you. And it is special. Yeah, personally, I am working on colors of icebergs. For color, I'm working on color and texture for icebergs, and that's really what I'll be making, very small samples. And I've got a number of materials to fuse to create a texture, and a number of different powders and sheets of glass and transparent and opaque to try to give a feeling of glacier and the texture and the depth of the glaciers. That's personally what I'm working on. We've only got a week here, so we'll get in maybe 4 firings.
Sounds great. I hope you've had a chance to do some extensive in-person research on that.
I have, yes. I always marvel at my mailbox in the morning, because it's always got a half a dozen messages from Steve Klein about a different article he's been researching and reading that day.
That's great. That's wonderful. Any other questions? Well, if there are no other questions, and I know Steve has a long day and a long week ahead of him to be creative amongst his peers. So I just want to let you know that it has been actually a pleasure meeting you, Steve. This was our first
You too,
encounter
Jane.
with one another, and really learning more and more in depth about your work. And so I truly appreciate you taking the time today and talking with us. I encourage everyone who has not been out to see this, it's not always black and white, exhibition at Imagine Museum to please come by. It's a beautiful show, and you can see Steve's work that's right behind me. You can actually come in and appreciate it, and the museum in its entirety. Just as a reminder for Florida residents, we're having a Sunshine Special this month, of which all adult tickets are $12. So this is a great time to grab a friend and to come out to the museum to really experience what we have here. Everyone have a fantastic day on this September 20th. It looks like there was a full moon out there, or there is one today. So get out and enjoy nature and think of Steve. Steve, thanks again.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Jane.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Steve.